Hi, and one of the big changes that's going to come in 7.1.5 in January is secondary stat changes. Secondary stats have been causing all sorts of problems, especially for itemization. People don't know what's an upgrade. You can have an item that's potentially 40 or 50 item levels higher than what you've already got, and you won't equip it because it's not an upgrade. But what about people who don't really know what's an upgrade or not? Item level is supposed to tell you whether something is an upgrade, but it doesn't. So what Blizzard have done is they've identified secondary stats as being the real culprit here, and they're going to make some changes in the patch coming in January to take account of that. I'm going to go over those changes now, explain the implications, and go through some practical steps that you can take to make sure that you don't miss out when the patch goes live. So in the main, Blizzard are doing three things to change for secondary stats. The first and the most impactful is they're changing how much of a secondary stat rating you need for 1%. For example, at the moment, you need 350 crit for 1% crit. In the patch, that's going to change to 400. Okay, I've put the values here so you can actually see all of them. What you'll notice is that versatility is going to be hit harder than most. Possibly a reason for that is that versatility generally is one of the more useful stats, especially at this point in Legion. It certainly is for me at the moment, largely because I don't have that much of it. It's not easy to come across versatility on raid gear. So that one is being hit. So the upshot of that one really is, if versatility is your best stat or one of your best stats now, it may not be when the patch goes live. That doesn't mean to say it's bad. It's just that the overall priority of stats may change. It's just a bit of a warning for that one. Now, what's the purpose of this? It's quite simple. It's to make primary stats much more powerful in relation than secondary stats. So, for example, if you've got something that's 10 or 15 item levels above what you currently have, it's much more likely to be an upgrade if you've got primary stat as being your most important stat. Because the primary stat always increases according to item level. But the secondary stats, although they increase as well, if the difference between two secondary stats that you're best and two secondary stats that you're worst, it doesn't matter that you've got more of the worst ones, it may not be an upgrade. It might, but it may not be. Now, the next change they're bringing in, because that's not going to do anything for necks or rings. Necks and rings don't have primary stats on them. So, and it's necks and rings that have the worst problems here. It's actually pretty unlikely that, say, a pair of boots or a chest or a head that's 40 item levels above what you've got won't be an upgrade. It basically will. It will. It's mostly for rings and necks where they don't have that primary stat. So what they're also going to do is to increase the budget. They're increasing the budget for secondary stats sort of across the board, but most especially for rings and necks. Now, what they did with secondary stats in Legion is they wanted a situation whereby as you level up from 100 to 110, you're not losing your secondary stats as badly. Now, this is something that did pretty well for Legion. In previous expansions, it was quite common to go up a level and suddenly the amount of haste or crit or whatever you had that was important to you that was representing a much lower percentage at that next level. You could actually become weaker in the same gear the following level, or you certainly felt it. So what they've done is to smooth it out as you go up. But what they don't want is what's happened in previous expansions, is where by the end of the expansion, you've got so much of your preferred stat that you're getting silly effects going on, where you can have like 100% crit or something like that, to the point where the class no longer plays as it's intended and it becomes broken. Hello, full groups of arcane mages blowing bosses up in a few seconds. They wanted to avoid that. So what they did is they said that although we're going to smooth it out as you level up, when you get 110, as you gear up at 110, we're going to significantly reduce the rate at which you get secondary stats. They still want to do that. They still want the primary stat budget to be much higher, and that again will help. That's always something that would have helped as the expansion went on to make item level a definite upgrade. But they've just increased the secondary stat budget a little bit because secondary stats are still going to be important even with these changes. So those are the changes that they've made in terms of how it's going to sort of impact on you. First of all, what I would strongly recommend is if you get any high item level upgrades from coins or whatever, that you look at it now and you think, well, that's not an upgrade. Don't get rid of it. Don't disenchant it. Don't sell it. I would just put it in your bank, because things that are not an upgrade now, I mean, we're still a few weeks away. You might have got something even higher. But just in general terms, just because it's not an upgrade now doesn't mean to say it won't be when this patch goes live in about a month's time. We don't know exactly what you said in the first few weeks of January. So who knows when exactly that is going to be. The other thing to note, and this is sort of my commentary on it, where I'm not hugely impressed, I have to say, it's going to make it better, sure. Now, something they said when they were first acknowledging the problem some time ago was that they expected a plus 15 item level upgrade to be an automatic, yes, that's definitely an upgrade, I'm going to equip that instead. It doesn't matter what secondary stats. So even if what you've got are your two best secondary stats, and what you're presented with a new piece of gear are your two worst secondary stats, if it's 15 or more item levels above, it's a definite upgrade. They don't even want you to think about it. Now, that has not been the case up to now. They say that that is going to be the case when this patch goes live. So that's an improvement. That's a definite improvement. However, I mean, 15 item levels is a lot. What if you had 5 or 10 item levels above? I would say 10 item levels above is still quite a lot. But what they seem to be saying here is that's not a definite upgrade. In fact, what they actually said is they want plus 15 item levels to be a definite upgrade. They want plus 10 item levels to mostly be an upgrade. And anything less than that is just maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But even saying mostly at plus 10, that's not the same as it definitely is. And for someone wanting to make sure they're equipping an upgrade, that's not very helpful. I'll be honest, I don't care whether it's a 95% chance to be an upgrade or a 10% chance. It's less than a 100% chance, which means you're going to have to do something. And what you're going to have to do is what we've always had to do throughout Legion, is you're going to have to sim yourself, you're going to have to get your stat weights, and you're going to have to work out which piece of gear is an upgrade or not. And this is the sort of thing that only a small percentage of the player base are even doing. If you don't know how to do this, by the way, I have done videos on it. I'll link that in the description below. If you haven't checked that out, you'll need to be familiar with Simcraft, which I do a video on, and quite a good add-on to be able to compare these things is Pawn, and I've done a video on those as well, so you can check that one out. But yeah, so to my mind, it improves the situation. It's not making it brilliant, because if it's not plus 15 item levels above, you're still in a quandary of is it or isn't it? And you still have to use the same methods that we currently do now. So to my mind, the people who are sort of more casual players and won't really be familiar with how to theory craft or how to work things out or use add-ons or anything like that, which has got to be the vast majority of the player base, they're still going to be going with item level and potentially putting on gear that's not an upgrade, doing worse as a result, getting really confused. And the people who were already, using Simcraft and stat weights and things like that are still going to have to do that. So the only thing I think this helps is when you go to higher levels of a particular difficulty of a raid, or you go to the next raid up, for example, from Emerald Nightmare to Trials of Valor, the gear you get is more likely to be an upgrade. I mean, that's benefit. You're less likely to find it going to waste or going to off-spec that's not being used very much. So that's a sort of benefit. So it's going to help you gear up, but it doesn't help you to any greater extent work out whether it's an upgrade or not. So I still definitely think there's work to be done. Hopefully Blizzard realise that there's still work to be done on this. Now, in terms of what Blizzard actually do say about it, because Ian Hazacostas, the game director, did do a Q&A yesterday where he went through a few things. He first of all went to emphasise that they're not going to nerf anyone out of this. He says the aim was not to nerf or to buff anyone. And he said, if anything, your raid group should feel a little bit stronger than the week before. And I think what they're doing here is, the problem to solve is that item level is a really poor indicator. So they wanted to improve on that. And when they make big changes like this, which they have done sometimes in the past, you do usually end up being a bit stronger out of it, because what they don't want to do is create a situation where a fight you beat last week, you can't beat this week because your DPS isn't as high. That would be a really bad PR move. So they don't want to do that. So what they're trying to do is get it as close as they can, but where they have to go either side of exactly the same, they're going to go slightly on the side of slightly more powerful. And two other things they have noted, because there's a lot of, well, not a lot, there's some players that have a huge reliance on crit. They have sort of said you will lose a few percentage points of crit, of course, if you have been stacking lots of crit, but it's not going to hit you overall because of the extra gain in primary stats that you'll get out of this. And the other thing is for tanks, this isn't necessarily a change for 7.1.5 as such, but more for the future potentially. But what they've said is they're sort of aware that primary stats are not necessarily that awesome for tanks. What they want to do in the future is give them more of a mitigation use, but in the meantime give them a better budget on something like stamina, say, which is more useful. So maybe for tanks with the gear, less emphasis on the primary stats and more on getting extra stamina out of it. So that's what's coming in 7.1.5 with item level and secondary stats. Hopefully that explains what they're going to do and puts you in a bit of a picture. As I say, most important thing to take away from this is, in the meantime, high item level items that you get, just keep hold of them and then sort of retest them when the patch goes live, because it might be an upgrade. Bear in mind that the order of your secondary stats may change a little. Some specs like mine, for example, Retribution Paladin, they change around anyway all the time because they're actually fairly close together. But for specs where they're not, some things may change around a little bit because the different secondary stats, are being nerfed to different degrees. Okay, for the three main ones, they're being knocked down by 50. You need an extra 50 rating to get 1%. For versatility, it's working out at what, basically another 75. So versatility is taking a slightly bigger hit than the other ones. But anyway, hope you found it useful as always. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and share if you did. And until next time, I'll see you later.